Investigative journalist Gary Allen, in his book, None Dare Call It Conspiracy, reports that the goal of the Council on Foreign Relations is, quote, simply to abolish the United States with its constitutional guarantees of liberty. He cites the Council's own publication, Study Number 7, from November of 1959, openly advocates, quote, building a new international order which must be responsive to world aspirations for peace and social and economic change, including states labeling themselves as socialist. John Buchanan reported early in this film, the Bush connection to the Nazis, I.G. Farben, Brown Brothers Harriman, and the Union Banking Corporation. Averell Harriman is also a Council on Foreign Relations member. Mendelssohn Bank of Amsterdam and Henry Schroeder Bank, which has branches in Frankfurt, London, and New York, were the major financiers for Hitler's rise to power. The law firm of Sullivan and Cromwell provided chief legal counsel to Schroeder Bank. John Foster Dulles and Allen Dulles are senior partners in that law firm. The Council on Foreign Relations is nothing more than a front for J.P. Morgan and Company, who was key to forming the Federal Reserve, and also eventually merged with none other than Rockefeller's Chase Manhattan Bank. Allen Dulles was fired by John F. Kennedy. After the war, 47 members of the Council on Foreign Relations were among the American delegates at the founding of the United Nations in 1945. Members include John Foster Dulles, Nelson Rockefeller, Harry Dexter White, and Alger Hiss, who were both communist agents. If you look at the list of financial institutions that are members or have operatives within the Council on Foreign Relations, it's like a who's who received over $1 trillion in recent TARP funds. J.P. Morgan Chase received $25 billion, Merrill Lynch $45 billion, AIG and Citibank $50 billion, Morgan Stanley $10 billion, Goldman Sachs received $10 billion. In total, over $1 trillion went to financial institutions that are members of the Council on Foreign Relations. Incidentally, current Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner is also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. So you can clearly see what they envision as social and economic change. Quite simply, theft and slavery. When John F. Kennedy stood up to the ruthless and monolithic conspiracy, abolished the Federal Reserve, and fired Allen Dulles, he signed his own death warrant. Research George Herbert Walker Bush's connection to the cover-up of the Kennedy assassination. You are in for a rude awakening if you supported either Bush. They are both traitors to the United States and should be tried for treason, placed in front of firing squads. But by now you must be wondering what all of this has to do with 9/11. And here's where you will find this documentary to be the most comprehensive, confrontational, and explosive documentary to date regarding the September 11th attacks. The official accounts of 9/11 cannot even withstand the most primitive of deductive reasoning and critical thinking skills. The 9/11 Commission's, quote, complete account and the National Institute of Standards and Technologies reports regarding the collapses ride on scientifically flawed and politically driven conclusions. This might expose them as liars and thus complicit in some way, but does not expose the true nature or magnitude of the deception. We're going to take a close look at all the coincidences of 9/11 and apply what I call a probability of outcome formula, which is basically the simple question, what are the odds? In a multiple event probability of outcome formula, you multiply the odds of one event times the odds of another. An example would be that two events with a 1 out of 10 chance of occurring would leave the odds of both occurring at 100 to 1. We're going to apply this incredible number of coincidences contained within the 9/11 attacks. This will remove any level of plausible deniability for the killers. And let's start with one of my favorite targets. When Clark Clifford wrote the NSA Act that founded the CIA, he was tutored by two Wall Street lawyers, John Foster Dulles and Allen Dulles. Those names sound familiar? Indeed they should. Now, the CIA has always worked hand in hand with Wall Street since its inception. The CIA has tracking software known as PROMIS. PROMIS looks for spikes in the stock market so it can look for inside trading. The PROMIS software was up and running up to and during the attacks. So the CIA is aware of who took out the put options on the airlines, as well as who took out the put options on the various financial institutions that were within the World Trade Center towers that also had put options placed on them. Now, that brings us to A.B. Brown. Remember A.B. Brown? Run by none other than former CIA Executive Director Buzzy Kromgaard. So, this is where the put options were placed, through A.B. Brown. You're starting to catch on? Okay, since those options were placed through A.B. Brown, and Buzzy Kromgaard runs A.B. Brown, he is clearly aware of who took out those put options. Additionally, the CIA, with their tracking software, is almost certainly to also have a pretty darn good idea of who took out those options. Now, Buzzy Kromgaard is also tied to Deutsche Bank. Remember the bank on the leaked Pentagon document, a plan for post-Saddam Iraq? And Deutsche Bank is also tied to Swiss Re and Munich Re, the company that insured the towers for Silverstein. More on the insurance policy in a minute. We haven't even touched on that yet. So, if there was evidence within the tracking software and within the A.B. Brown's records that could clear the CIA officials for the put options placed on United, American, and the other financial institutions within the World Trade Center, don't you think they'd be releasing it? However, if there was evidence implicating them, it would be in their best interest not to release it. At least they were clever enough to leave those options unclaimed. That could have been a real thorn in their side. But with all the international investigation, mainstream media doesn't touch it. Interesting. The financial evidence in itself wouldn't be enough to convince me either. However, there is some other staggering coincidences that the odds are so astronomically high, they act as a cast for other conclusions that might otherwise be debatable. Operation Northwoods and 9/11 are so nearly identical that one cannot possibly believe that Northwoods was planned by the Joint Chiefs and approved by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Lyman Lemonster, and that 9/11 was planned by Muslim extremists. And if you honestly believe that they hate us so much because we have freedom, take a closer look at who's destroying our freedoms. And additionally, if you think that that was the only underlying motive, then go back to watching Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity. Okay, here are some direct quotes from the declassified Northwoods documents. An F-86 painted correctly would convince air passengers that they actually saw a Cuban MiG. A civilian airliner at Eglin Air Force Base could be numbered painting to an exact replica of civilian aircraft. Regular aircraft converted to drone complete with a new tail number. And at the precise moment, a submarine would dispense F-101 parts, parachutes, etc. Surface ships and aircraft would then find the parts. At the designated time, the duplicate could be substituted for the actual civilian aircraft. The drone would continue flying the filed flight plan. Blow up ammunition inside the base and start fires. Sabotage a U.S. ship and start large fires. Blow up a drone vessel. Explode plastics at carefully chosen locations. Sink a boatload of Cubans en route to Florida, real or simulated. Land friendly Cubans. Stage the attack on the base. Mock funerals. Fake victims. Selected passengers would be boarded under carefully prepared aliases. Start many rumors. Develop a communist Cuban terror plot against the Miami area, Florida cities, and even Washington. Don't go anywhere yet. We're just getting warmed up.